As woodworkers, we only ask two things of our table saw fence: that it doesn't wobble and that it supports the wood we need to cut. So it was time for a new one. The idea was to build a fence that glides smoothly, stays precise, and is easy to use. Sounds simple, right? Yeah, we thought so too. So we knew what we wanted, but to make it, we needed some help. JLCMC came to the rescue. They make mechatronic components and supplied the parts for this build. So here are the plans, and yes, there is a reason I do not draw for a living. Okay, on to the parts we will be using. A linear guide, an aluminum extrusion, another linear guide, a locking block, 4 pinions, and 6 racks. With the mechanical parts received and unpacked, it was time to figure out how to actually put it all together. If you've seen our last video, you know that drilling precision holes in wood by hand is not one of our strengths. We could have gotten a drill guide, but there was no time for that, so we opted to spend twice the time designing 3D parts instead. With the measurements in hand, I grabbed my trusty computer desk and dove into something I had no idea how to do, namely 3D design. But after some help from our neighbor and a lot of fun, and by fun I mean hair-pulling frustration, I had the first part designed. We don't have a CNC, but we do have a 3D printer that, well, it hasn't seen much use. After dusting it off and hitting print, the part actually came out perfect, without even having to level the machine. So we just knew that this would be easy street. Next up was disassembling the old table saw fence. And then we could mount a plywood strip to see how the linear guide would fit. This should give you an idea of what we're going for. The part fit perfectly and the blocks slide great, so now that the base mechanism was working, we could start measuring the height of the fence to design the rest of the pieces. To make things more sturdy, we also tapped the extrusion so we could screw the brackets to it. Some more 3D modeling frustration later, it was time to make a larger batch of parts. A 3D printer is great to have in a woodworking shop. It allows you to make custom jigs and parts from plastic in just 10 times as long as it would take you to do it in sturdier plywood. But at this point we were feeling pretty good about it. All the parts we needed were made and ready to go. Somehow we had misread the calipers just a little bit, so we needed to enlarge the holes to avoid the rail blocks pinching the rail. Turns out JLCMC has accurate measurements for all their parts on their site, but we were in a rush, so we didn't think about that at the time. Anyway, this was a minor hiccup, and with the holes slightly bigger, we mounted everything to the rails. We even printed this little hand wheel to move the table saw fence. It is shaped like a saw blade, which I thought was a pretty cool detail for a table saw fence. Or maybe I just wanted to show off that I finally started to get a grasp of the 3D software. It was time to tear down the old table. It was made from soft pine and it had no storage at all, so we decided to build a new one out of more stable plywood. We did reuse the old legs for the new cabinet base. It's all about being sustainable. And also it's cheaper than using new materials. When swapping out a table saw fence, it's generally smart to cut everything you need before disassembling the old fence, which we forgot. So now we had a bunch of plywood to cut and no fence on our table saw. There is a large table saw at our co-working space, but it was busy for the next hour and somehow we were already 4 days into this 2-day build, so we improvised. At its core, a table saw fence is just a straight piece that runs parallel to the blade, so we measured carefully, put down a piece of MDF, clamped it down, double-checked that it was square, just so we wouldn't turn the plywood strip into a javelin, and ripped it to width. It worked, but moving 2 clamps and squaring the fence to the blade every time you need to adjust it is a major hassle. So we wanted the new fence up and running before building the cabinet. We leveled everything and fixed the backing pieces for the linear guides to plywood on either side of the table saw. For the front guide we used a thin strip of plywood, attached the racks underneath, and mounted the linear guide on the front. Using the aluminum extrusion and the printed brackets as a height gauge, we fixed the guide assembly in place, both front and back. And if you've been watching this thinking there's no way those 3D printed brackets are strong enough, you're absolutely right. The fence was as rigid as a wet noodle. we gave up for the day. Now, while we try to recover emotionally from this disaster and figure out how to fix it, let me quickly show you how we ordered the components. We went to JLCMC site, selected the linear guide section and picked our rail. Then we chose the specs, the part number and quantity, and hit add to cart. We repeated that for the other parts we wanted to get, moved to checkout, picked the address and selected a shipping option. We went with DDP, so customs were covered. After going through the checkout, the parts were manufactured and we received them in about 14 days. All the part numbers are in the description. Alright, back to the build. The next morning we disassembled our embarrassment and used it as a drill guide for some plywood offcuts instead. That worked much better. Next up was the cabinets. I won't bore you with the details, there are many YouTube videos of building plywood cabinets much better than ours. But essentially we made 2 cabinets, each half the depth. Mainly because we had some plywood offcuts that were exactly half depth, so it made sense. They're square, level and hold stuff, which is all we need. So after getting them to where they should be, we could fix the plywood top in place. This was a great excuse to use our router jig from the last video, as the remaining pieces needed grooves to match the miter slots on the table saw. Then we fixed them into place with screws, glued in some dowels as plugs, and cut them flush. Things were shaping up nicely and the fence moves smoothly and locks in place. We were almost at the finish line, but it still flexed a bit. To fix it, we tried to install some plywood braces that didn't do much. We couldn't figure out what was wrong. Maybe there's some flex in the plywood, maybe it's because I used AI to pick the guide specs. But the guides seem rock solid, so if you have any idea, please let us know in the comments. As a workaround, we designed a secondary locking mechanism that we printed out. The brake pad printed perfectly. The other parts were printed overnight, and it didn't go completely as expected. The reprint also had some layer separation issues that we fixed with a heat gun. I miscalculated the measurements, so the brake was dragging, and its screws were scratching up the top. We didn't feel like risking another spaghetti incident on a reprint, so we mounted a plywood piece of the fence and then the 3D printed part to the plywood. The way this mechanism works is that a screw goes through a nut and presses down on a coin-shaped plastic piece, which pushes a rubber-like pad onto the tabletop. That spreads the pressure evenly and keeps the fence from shifting when we tighten it, which it did when we tried to use just a screw. The pad is also wide enough to be used over the miter slots. Once the mechanism was assembled, we screwed it into the plywood and then temporarily repurposed the hand wheel to turn the screw. That works great, and the fence is rock solid when both locks are engaged. Next order of business was connecting the fence to the rack. We used the part from the 3D print fail from earlier, as no forces are applied here. And then we attached a pinion on each side of a shaft. Once the teeth engaged, we tightened the bolt, and now we can micro-adjust the fence position with the wheel. Is this necessary? Not really, but it's great for fine adjustments. To test the fence, Sam set it pretty wide, locked it down, and made the cut. It works great, and we have capacity for even wider cuts. Only one thing left, to make a larger hand wheel and return the orange one to its rightful place. So here it is, our slightly over-engineered table saw fence in all its glory. As usual, things did not go entirely to plan, but we are really happy with the result. We used the 3D printer for some things here, but honestly, wood works just as well. The aluminum extrusion works great as a fence and has the added benefit of having T-slots that we can attach stuff to if we need a taller fence or something else. And in case you're wondering why the fence is almost entirely on the right side of the saw, it's mainly because we use that part of the saw anyway, but also because we have some more woodshop upgrades coming, so stay tuned. Thank you very much for watching, and a huge thanks to JLCMC for providing the parts and sponsoring this build.